That was it. Guys, there's a couple of vent hoses that I wanted to install for the engine just to keep mud and muck out. This one runs down through there. This guy here just goes straight down. And you want to make sure that you go ahead and put those on, guys, because you don't want a bunch of mud and stuff getting up in those vent holes. They lead over to the power valve channels. As the old rear brake master cylinder reservoir was all just chemically rotted, physically smashed, wasn't sealing the weather out. It was just a mess. I got this cheap little European style, Ducati style remote for 10 bucks on eBay. So I'm just gonna, I know it's hokey, but I'm just gonna zip tie it. If I like this setup and it works, then I'll drill and tap a hole there and, you know, do something with that. But for right now, it's a functional setup. All right, it's very important that you have a non-flange standard nut down in this brake clevis, and I'll show you why. You have to have a nut on the top and bottom of this so that you can properly adjust it. The way to adjust this is that bottom nut lives inside that clevis, and then when you get it all adjusted where you want it, then you tighten this one down. This one doesn't come with a flange from the factory. It comes with two that look like that, but I couldn't find the other one, and I just grabbed this out of that little spec bolt kit. Make sure you have plenty of grease in there in that groove. Let it sploosh out all around and keep that pedal nice and lubricated. Make sure you have your brake adjuster bolts put in properly, guys. Some models have different types of systems for this, but you set the brake adjustment height adjustment bolt first, then you tighten this up for engagement. Okay, they're two different adjustments. It's not just how much pressure it's putting on the brake, it's where the braking begins and then how much play you have in it. So guys, as you torque this brake pivot bolt on, make sure the pedal stays free. See that? It's got to be, guys. It's got to be. Alright. Next step you want to do is figure out where you want the pedal height to start. Don't even worry about the clevis yet. Don't even put the pin in it yet. Ignore that. Figure out where you want the pedal height to be when you start. You want it to be up here? I don't think so. You want it to be all the way down there? Probably not. You probably want it to be slightly below the angle of the foot peg. So that would mean my adjuster bolt's too short. Okay, do I want it to be there? No. Okay. I'm going to guess and say I want mine to start right there. That's just a guess. I haven't ridden it yet. But just from experience, I'm going to guess that. Next thing we need to do is go ahead and attach the clevis. Okay, like that. I got a washer back there to protect the cotter pin. This I just lube with WD-40. This I lube with grease on the pivot. Okay, this I just lube with WD-40. But I got to cotter pin this. Then I got to cotter pin that back bolt right there. That's a pivot safety so that the whole pivot can't come out and fall off. Just like with the exhaust, I probably should have put this on first. But we'll fuss with it, see what we can do. See what we can do. Ah, there we go. Look at that. Nice, healthy, strong return spring. See that? That little bit of play. It ain't much. It probably should have a little bit more than that. But that's okay. We'll ride it and try it, bleed it, make sure it's returning and working correctly. All right, one last safety thing. You gotta watch these guys. Look at that. You cannot have that. You cannot have that. That will not happen. Do not allow that. So, see how I got it facing the way I got it facing? If it pops out forward, you know, which it's not going to do, it would go that way. But you don't want the crack to the back. All right, you want it facing that way. Hey guys, I'm ready to start bleeding this rear brake setup. I went to get some nice fresh .4, and I wasn't going to buy this fancy dancy stuff. I was just going to get general automotive grade, because motocross brakes don't overheat and get hot like road race stuff. But all they had was that $14 for that jug of it, some high temperature stuff. So you don't need that for dirt bikes, but it's what they had, so I had to get it. I lost my 8mm wrench somewhere. I don't know where you guys put it, but I can't find it anywhere. So here's what I did. I just grabbed this out of my bicycle kit. That's my little bicycle tool that follows me around. I keep this little hose in my toolbox specifically for this reason. You never know when you're going to need to bleed a brake, and almost all motorcycles have this small size on it. So I keep this little hose just so that I can do this and keep the stuff from spraying all over the bike. You know, I just finished that swing arm, and I don't want to get a bunch of, you know, paint eating fluid on it and corrosion causing fluid on it and grease eating fluid on it. So I keep that hose in the toolbox. You guys really need to keep one of these around. You're gonna have to have it. So I put some fluid in here. It's a totally dry system, so we're gonna get bubbles right off the bat. Yep, there they are. There's the bubbles you're gonna get right off the bat. Now what they are is air exchanging into the master cylinder itself. There's no fluid in the line yet whatsoever. And I find to start the process, I leave this tight. I leave it tight, and I'll tell you why. Having a little tiny bit of microscopic pressure build up in there and then release helps exchange the air into the master cylinder. Then I crack this loose. Then I crack it loose and just pump this through. Sometimes it won't pump through, especially if it's old nasty lines and an empty system like this, in which case what we'll have to do is the old pump and hold, which you would eventually go to that for proper bleeding anyway. So alright, here we go. It's tight. We pump it up, build some pressure theoretically. It's really not, because there's no fluid in the line. And then we release it while holding the pedal. While holding the pedal, release the fluid. And then while still holding that down, you tighten that back. Pump it again. It's just the old pump and hold. So now we're pumping. Crack that loose, tighten it back up while that's still down, and then pump again. I'm going to shut the camera off because this is long and tedious, especially to siphon through on a dry system. Pump, hold, crack loose, retighten, pump and hold, crack loose, retighten, pump and hold, crack loose, retighten, literally until you can't stand it anymore, and right about that time you'll be halfway done. Is that the bleeder itself was clogged with debris from being in the tumbler. I tumbled that caliper in the tumbler, and resin and dirt and crap got up in that hole and sealed it off. So I took the bleeder out, and it started gravity bleeding, and I thought, yep, there it is, it's clogged. So I cleaned it up with some safety wire and poked a hole through it and sprayed it with some carb spray, made it nice and clean, and now we're going back on it. So here we go. See those air bubbles coming out, guys? That's fluid transferring through the system. Eventually, when all that air comes out, it'll start to get really pressurized, and then the brake will start working, and you'll see the pads start squeezing up on the rotor. Right now, the pads aren't even touching the rotor, but they will. They'll press in. Here we go. We'll keep going. And the whole time you're doing that, you got to make sure you got fluid in this reservoir. If that reservoir gets low and it sucks any air down into the hose, you got to start all over and get that air through. So don't do that. Keep an eye on this, and when it gets low, top it off. This stuff will eat your paint, so you want to be real careful with it. As I bled it till all the air came out, here's the rubber diaphragm. Hear that air exchanging? I don't know if you can hear it or not. But that's the little pinhole that gives it ventilation. There's a rubber diaphragm that keeps the fluid clean. And there's your reservoir cap. I'll have to ride a little bit and break the pads in, and as the pads break in and get all the rust off the rotor and everything gets nice and burned up clean and scraped up clean, then that pedal will live higher in its stroke, and we'll see how it feels when we ride it. If we need more engagement, we can always just adjust more height into it and take some play out in the back and go from there. But we'll see what it does when we ride it. All right, on to the front. Forward motion, tally ho!